Before we begin, please leave a comment, share your thoughts and let us know your lessons learned in the comment section below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. The city's skyline stretched endlessly into the horizon, bathed in the fading hues of the setting sun. Marcus Grant, a man who had built an empire from scratch, stood alone in his office on the 50th floor, gazing out at the vast expanse of concrete and steel beneath him. The world below seemed so far away, yet he felt strangely tethered to it. There was no excitement in the view tonight, no thrill in the way the city lights flickered like distant stars. He was alone, and the cause of his solitude sat quietly in front of him. A crisp white envelope resting on his polished glass desk. For the past 20 minutes, Marcus had done nothing but stare at the envelope. Its simple design, elegant yet unassuming, taunted him. He had known it was coming. He had hoped, however, that it wouldn't. But there it was, an invitation to the wedding of Eleanor West. The woman he had once planned a future with. The woman who had vanished from his life without a word. The woman who had left him a year ago. Without explanation, with nothing but a short, cold text message that simply read, "I can't do this." Marcus had tried to move on. He had built more, achieved more, and buried the pain of that sudden abandonment deep beneath layers of ambition and success. But every now and then, the wound would reopen, and he would find himself questioning what went wrong. Eleanor had been his world. She was the one he had pictured as his partner, his equal, the one who would walk beside him as they built something beautiful together. But that dream had shattered in an instant. Now, she was getting married to someone else. Someone far older, far wealthier, and far more powerful. A man whose name, Carter Hawk, was synonymous with influence and control in every boardroom in the city. The invitation didn't just sting, it burned with the intensity of an old wound reopening. Marcus clenched his jaw. His fingers hovered over the envelope. But his mind raced with conflicting emotions, anger, disbelief, and something darker, more elusive. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to throw it away, to pretend he had never received it. But another part of him, one that had been buried under the weight of his success, felt an undeniable pull. What would it be like to show up? To walk into that room with a calmness that belied the chaos inside? To show her that he had moved on? Or maybe, to prove to himself that he could still walk through those doors, unaffected by the memories they would drag up? With a quiet sigh, Marcus reached for the envelope. He had to open it. He had to see what it said. Slowly, almost reverently, he slid his finger under the flap and pulled out the invitation. It was simple, elegant, exactly what he would have expected from Eleanor. And yet, as his eyes scanned the words, the world seemed to blur around him. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Eleanor West and Carter Hawk." The invitation read, followed by the date and location. The Crystal Gardens, an extravagant venue that catered only to the city's elite. Marcus exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the paper. He knew the venue well. It was where the city's most powerful people hosted their most exclusive gatherings. The thought of Eleanor, standing beside another man, exchanging vows with him in front of hundreds of people, hit him like a physical blow. It was as if the very life he had imagined with her had been erased, replaced by this stranger, a man who would now take his place. But it wasn't just about her. It was about Marcus too. The invitation wasn't just a reminder of what he had lost, it was a test. A test of his strength, his resolve, and his ability to face the past without letting it shatter him. As he stared at the invitation, his mind raced. He wasn't the same man who had fallen in love with Eleanor. He had changed. He had built a life, an empire, from the ground up, and he wasn't going to let a wedding invitation, however painful, define him. But still, there was that nagging question at the back of his mind. Why had she left him? What had happened to the woman he had known? The woman he had once planned to spend his life with? In a moment of frustration, Marcus stood up, pushing the chair back so violently that it scraped against the floor. He needed to clear his mind. The walls of his penthouse were closing in on him. He needed air. He needed to feel something outside of this empty, sterile office that had come to represent the void inside him. Marcus grabbed his coat and left the office. Stepping into the cool evening air, the city was buzzing with life. But he remained detached from it all. He wasn't interested in the noise, the flashing lights, or the sea of people rushing by. All he wanted was to be alone with his thoughts. As he walked down the bustling streets, his mind kept drifting back to the invitation. To Eleanor. To the wedding he wasn't sure he even wanted to attend. The question lingered, why now? Why did she send this invitation? Was it an attempt to provoke him? To prove that she had moved on? Or was it some kind of misguided attempt to bring closure to a relationship that had ended without explanation? He walked aimlessly, not caring where his feet took him. His mind was in turmoil, but he couldn't focus on any one thought long enough to make sense of it. As he passed a small bakery, a figure caught his attention. A woman sat on the ground, her back resting against the bakery wall. She was eating a meat pie slowly, savoring each bite as if it was the only thing in the world that mattered. Something about her stopped Marcus in his tracks. There was a calmness to her that intrigued him. She wasn't sitting there asking for change, begging for attention. No, she was simply enjoying her meal, her eyes peaceful as she watched the world go by. She didn't seem to care that she was sitting on the cold pavement, or that her clothes were worn and faded. For a moment, Marcus felt an unfamiliar tug in his chest. He couldn't explain it, but there was something magnetic about her presence. She looked up, and their eyes met. "What?" she asked, a slight smirk on her lips. "Never seen a woman eat before?" Marcus chuckled, surprised by the sharpness in her voice. "I've seen plenty of people eat," he said, "just not with so much joy." The woman raised an eyebrow. "That's because most people don't know how to enjoy anything anymore," she said, taking another slow bite. "They have food but no peace." Marcus tilted his head. "And you, do you have peace?" She nodded, wiping her hand on her skirt. "Yes, peace. Meat pie. A good spot in the shade. Life's not so bad." Something in her response struck Marcus deeply. He felt a connection, an understanding that was rare. He hadn't expected to find this tranquility, in someone who seemed to have so little. But somehow, she carried herself with an ease that Marcus envied. "What's your name?" he asked, intrigued by her calm demeanor. She looked at him, studying him for a moment before answering. "Sophia," she said simply, her gaze sharp and knowing. "And you must be Marcus Grant, the tech billionaire. I know who you are." He raised an eyebrow. "You know a lot for someone sitting on the street." Sophia's lips curled into a faint smile. "I listen," she said, "and people talk, especially when they think you're invisible." Marcus stood there, uncertain of what had drawn him to this woman, but not ready to walk away just yet. There was something compelling about her. "Why are you sitting out here?" he asked, taking a seat on the bench next to her. Sophia shrugged. "I could ask you the same thing. You don't look like you're here for a casual stroll." Marcus hesitated. "I'm just trying to clear my head." Sophia smiled again. "Well, I'm not going anywhere. So, if you need to talk, I'm all ears." And just like that, Marcus found himself talking, spilling thoughts he hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. His anger, his confusion, and his lingering hurt over Eleanor. Sophia listened quietly, offering nothing but her presence and the rare gift of peace that Marcus had long forgotten how to appreciate. That night, as he walked away from the bakery, Marcus realized something. Maybe it wasn't just the wedding or the invitation that had brought him here. Maybe, just maybe, it was the chance encounter with Sophia that would show him the path to something he had lost along the way, his peace. The day of the wedding arrived, and Marcus found himself standing at the entrance of the Crystal Gardens, the grandest venue in the city. It was a place where the wealthy and powerful came to celebrate their triumphs, to flaunt their success, to be seen. The grand chandeliers hung like 1,000 stars, casting their glow over the polished floors, and the scent of expensive flowers mingled with the sound of clinking glasses. Guests in designer suits and gowns mingled, laughing and chatting, while photographers clicked away, capturing every moment. Marcus felt out of place amidst this sea of luxury. He wasn't the type to flaunt his wealth. He had always preferred the quiet corners, the small moments that felt more real than the extravagant shows thrown for the elite. But today, he wasn't here to observe from the sidelines. He was here to face the woman who had broken his heart. The woman who had walked away without a single explanation. Sophia, the woman who had unexpectedly entered his life, was standing beside him as his plus one. She was wearing a simple yet elegant dress, nothing flashy. But it fit her perfectly, accentuating her natural beauty. Her hair, which had once been messy and wild, was now styled in soft waves that framed her face. Her eyes calm and confident. As they walked through the grand hall, all eyes turned to them. Marcus noticed it immediately, the whispers, the stares. People didn't recognize him so much as the woman beside him. No one could quite place her, but everyone seemed to be drawn to her, as if she had an aura that commanded attention without even trying. Her presence was magnetic, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling inside him. The woman beside him wasn't just any stranger. She was someone who belonged in a world far beyond the surface-level glamour of these high society events. He led her through the crowd, trying to avoid the curious eyes of the other guests. But it was impossible. As they approached the table where some of the city's most influential people were seated, the murmurs began to swirl. People recognized the calmness in Sophia's demeanor, the way she moved with purpose and grace, and they couldn't understand how someone like her could be standing in the same room as them. Then, from across the room, Marcus saw her, Eleanor. His heart twisted painfully in his chest. She was standing by the bar, laughing with Carter Hawk, the man she had chosen to marry. She looked stunning in her wedding dress, her smile wide and perfect. But there was something in her eyes that made Marcus pause. It was as though she was putting on a show, pretending everything was perfect while hiding the cracks that ran deep beneath her flawless exterior. Sophia noticed Marcus's gaze and turned toward him. "Don't look at her too long," she said softly, her voice steady but full of understanding. "She's not the reason you're here." Marcus blinked, startled by the depth of her insight. He hadn't said a word about Eleanor, but Sophia seemed to know exactly what was going through his mind. "You're right," he said quietly, his tone shifting, "but she's still part of the story." Sophia gave him a small, knowing smile. "Then let's make it the last chapter." As the night unfolded, Marcus felt the weight of the past pressing down on him. The tension between him and Eleanor was palpable, even though they didn't exchange a single word. But it wasn't Eleanor who caught his attention the most, it was Sophia. She had seamlessly integrated herself into the crowd, her sharp intellect and quiet confidence drawing the attention of the most powerful men in the room. At one point, she was deep in conversation with a group of businessmen, discussing the future of digital banking and the rise of cryptocurrency. Marcus watched from the sidelines, a mixture of admiration and curiosity bubbling inside him. She wasn't just talking for the sake of speaking, she was teaching, influencing, and captivating the room with her every word. Her voice was steady, clear, and powerful, and even Carter Hawk, the man everyone in the room respected and feared, was paying attention. It wasn't long before the topic turned to the state of the economy and the issues of corporate corruption that plagued the world. One of the businessmen made a casual remark about how corruption was just a part of life, an unfortunate truth they all had to accept. But Sophia's response was sharp, cutting through the complacency like a knife. "I disagree," she said calmly, her eyes meeting the man's. "Corruption isn't air, it's a choice. And once you start believing it's normal, that's when it wins." The room went silent. The man who had spoken first shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But Sophia didn't back down. She continued speaking, offering insights into the systemic problems that allowed corruption to thrive, and how the future of tech could disrupt these cycles. Her words resonated with everyone at the table, and even the previously disinterested Carter Hawk was leaning in, listening intently. When she finished, there was a brief moment of stunned silence before the table erupted into quiet murmurs of agreement. Marcus couldn't help but feel a swell of pride as he watched Sophia hold her ground. She wasn't just surviving in this world, she was thriving. Later, after dinner, Marcus found himself standing at the bar, his thoughts heavy. The weight of the night was starting to sink in. He had come here to confront the past, but he was realizing something important. He wasn't the same man who had loved Eleanor. He had changed, grown stronger, and his life had taken on a new direction. And it was Sophia, not Eleanor, who was standing beside him, guiding him through this transformation. As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself slipping away from the party, the noise and the chatter becoming a dull hum in the background. He stepped out onto the balcony, breathing in the cool night air, trying to clear his mind. Sophia followed him outside, her presence calming in the midst of his swirling thoughts. "You're quiet," she said softly, leaning against the railing beside him. "What's going on in that head of yours?" Marcus took a deep breath, looking out over the city skyline. "I thought I would feel something more tonight," he admitted. "Maybe anger, maybe regret, but all I feel is emptiness." Sophia nodded, her gaze distant. "Sometimes Closure doesn't come the way we expect it to, she said. Sometimes, it comes when we stop looking for it and start living for ourselves instead. Marcus turned to look at her. Really look at her for the first time that night. There was something in her eyes. Something raw and honest, that made him realize she wasn't just another fleeting acquaintance. She had a depth to her. A strength that he couldn't ignore. He smiled. A small, genuine smile that had eluded him for so long. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. Sophia didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him. Her expression softening. You don't need to thank me, she said. You've already done the hard part. You've faced your past. Now it's time to look to the future. And as Marcus stood there with Sophia, the weight of the past slowly began to lift. The questions about Eleanor, the anger, the bitterness, they no longer held the same power over him. In this moment, he realized that he had something much more valuable standing beside him. The evening was far from over. But for the first time that night, Marcus felt a quiet peace settle within him. The weeks that followed the wedding were filled with a quiet intensity that Marcus hadn't expected. The whirlwind of the wedding, the exposure of his past, and the enigmatic presence of Sophia had shifted something deep inside him. It wasn't just about Eleanor anymore. It wasn't even about revenge or proving something to anyone. It was about the journey he found himself on, one he had never anticipated, with someone who had become a constant presence in his life, Sophia. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the woman who had walked into his life so unexpectedly. Like a calm storm. At first, he had invited her to the wedding out of some misguided attempt at distraction. A way to counter Eleanor's perfect life with a presence of his own. But as the days had gone by, he realized it was more than that. Sophia had a quiet strength that fascinated him. Her ability to move through the world with grace. Her intelligence. Her fierce independence. It was intoxicating. But it wasn't just her outward appearance that drew him in. It was her depth, her sense of purpose that resonated with him on a level he couldn't quite articulate. One evening, after weeks of working late together, poring over legal documents, news articles, and confidential files that could finally expose Edward Harris' fraudulent empire, Marcus found himself standing by the large windows of his penthouse, staring out at the sprawling city below. He had built everything he had here, his empire, his reputation, his wealth, but none of it felt complete. The wealth of his office, the luxury of his cars, and the height of his buildings, it all seemed empty compared to the truth he had discovered in Sophia's journey. She had slowly, without any grand gestures, become more than just a partner in the investigation into Harris' crimes. She had become someone he couldn't stop thinking about. She wasn't like the women he had dated before. The models, the actresses, the high society women. Sophia had never asked for anything from him. She didn't want his wealth, his status, or his connections. All she wanted was to give a voice to those who had been silenced. To seek the truth that had been buried under years of corruption. But Sophia was also a woman who had known pain, betrayal, and loss. She had walked into his life with a scarred past. And he knew that in order to help her find peace, he would need to help her face the demons that had followed her from her earlier life. The man responsible for so much of her suffering, Edward Harris, was at the heart of it all. And the more Marcus learned about Harris' manipulation of the system, the more determined he became to bring him down. It was on one of those long nights, when they were huddled over stacks of paper, with coffee cups growing cold on the desk, that Marcus realized just how much Sophia had changed him. He had become someone who didn't just care about making money, building empires, or attending lavish parties. Now, his mind was consumed with thoughts of justice. The need to see Harris fall, to give Sophia back the dignity and respect she had lost, was overwhelming. Sophia's past had shaped her in ways Marcus could only begin to understand. She had been born into wealth, into privilege, and into a life where doors opened for her without question. But her father's downfall, his arrest, and the years she spent living on the streets had transformed her into someone who no longer trusted the system. She had seen how easily someone with power and money could manipulate the truth, twist it to their advantage, and crush anyone in their way. But Sophia hadn't given up. She hadn't allowed herself to be crushed, even when the weight of it all nearly broke her. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Marcus turned to Sophia, his eyes searching hers. "You know, I never imagined my life would turn out like this," he said quietly, his voice heavy with meaning. I thought I had everything I needed: money, success, power. But none of that matters if you don't have the right people around you. And I've never met anyone like you. Sophia. Sophia paused, her fingers lingering on the keyboard as she looked up at him. There was no emotion in her face, just quiet strength, but her eyes softened. I'm not the one who needs to be fixed, Marcus, she said, her voice steady but gentle. We're both searching for something: peace, justice, maybe even redemption. But you can't find that in things or in titles. You find it in the people who are willing to stand with you when everything falls apart. Marcus swallowed hard. The weight of her words hit him more than he expected. In that moment, he realized that it wasn't just the truth about Harris that mattered. It was also the truth about himself. About the man he had become. He had spent years building walls around himself, trying to protect his heart from the pain that came with love and loss. But Sophia had slowly cracked those walls open, revealing parts of him he hadn't known existed. As their investigation progressed, they uncovered more and more damning evidence against Harris. With each piece of evidence they gathered, Marcus's anger toward the man who had ruined Sophia's life grew. Harris' empire was built on lies, deceit, and manipulation. He had destroyed families, silenced the innocent, and twisted the system to his advantage. But what hurt the most was the way Harris had used Sophia's father as a pawn in his game. The man who had once been a powerful businessman had been framed, his life destroyed, while Harris walked away untouched, his wealth and power growing with each passing year. One night, as they sat in Marcus's office, reviewing the final pieces of evidence they had gathered, Sophia turned to him. We have everything we need, she said, her voice calm but firm. It's time to bring this to light. It's time for Harris to answer for what he's done. Marcus looked at her, his heart heavy with emotion. Are you ready for this? He asked. For the truth to come out? For everything to change? Sophia nodded. I've been ready for years, she said softly. This isn't just about Harris anymore. It's about giving my father his dignity back. About showing the world that the truth matters, even when the powerful try to hide it. The night of the gala was one Marcus would never forget. It was supposed to be a celebration of the city's elite, a gathering of businessmen, celebrities, and political figures, all gathered under the glittering lights of the ballroom. But as the evening unfolded, it became clear that it would be anything but a normal night. As the guests mingled, talking about deals and power plays, Marcus and Sophia stepped into the room together. There were gasps and whispers, but they walked through the crowd with quiet confidence. Sophia, in a simple yet elegant gown, moved with a grace that made every head turn. Her presence was undeniable. She wasn't just a woman at a party, she was a force that couldn't be ignored. At the front of the room, Edward Harris stood tall, his smug smile never leaving his face. But when Sophia stepped forward, the atmosphere shifted. The room went silent as she addressed the crowd, revealing the truth about Harris' manipulation, his lies, and his role in destroying her father's life. The evidence they had gathered was projected on the screen behind her: emails, bank transfers, fake documents, all pointing directly to Harris' crimes. The room was in shock as the reality of the situation sank in. Harris tried to deny it, but the police were already on their way, waiting outside to arrest him. His empire crumbled in front of everyone, his once untouchable reputation shattered. As Harris was taken away, handcuffed and broken, Marcus looked at Sophia. She stood there, unwavering, her eyes filled with quiet triumph. For the first time in a long time, she was free, free from the chains of her past, free from the weight of a lie that had consumed her life. The months that followed were filled with a sense of calm that Marcus had never known. He and Sophia continued to work together, not as partners in a crusade, but as equals. They built something new together, something that wasn't about wealth or power, but about creating a future they could both be proud of. As they sat together one evening, looking out over the city, Marcus took Sophia's hand in his. You've changed everything for me, he said softly. Sophia smiled, her eyes meeting his. We've both changed, she replied, and that's what matters. And as the city buzzed beneath them, they both knew that they had found something far more valuable than wealth or success. They had found peace, justice, and, perhaps most importantly, each other.